Thank you for joining us for a briefing by Dr. Tiffany Galvin Green on all of the programs and research and activities that she's doing at Carroll for improving our diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tiffany's been here since 2019. We were lucky to steal her away from Vanderbilt. So she's sitting here with me. And what we wanted to do today is to have Tiffany walk you through some of the new things or enhanced things that she and her team have been working on, what her strategy is for making our work better at John Carroll, and invite your feedback. So if that's okay, we're going to get started, and Tiffany can walk us through some of her vision. She's got some really cool stuff going on, and I'm sitting here beside her, and we will see how it goes. Right, Tiffany? So welcome, welcome, welcome. And hello to some of you I haven't seen for a while. Okay, thank you. Good to see everyone. I'm glad you could join me. I have just a couple of things in line with what we're doing as a campus overall in terms of inspired futures. Then I thought it was right to talk about how we are taking that one step further to what I'd like to refer to as sort of inspired belonging kind of campaign, and different ways that my division in general has been working, and specifically student-focused initiatives, which is where we have some pretty good targeted goals for more immediate expansion, and how we are poised to be able to meet those particular goals. Just starting out with, if everyone isn't aware, we adopted with the most current, strategic plan. We revised the Mission and Diversity Committee, and in particular, as a part of the board of directors, made sure that we revised our John Carroll University official diversity statement. And this is just the opening line of the statement, just that captures for us sort of our spirit and general commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In keeping with our Jesuit mission of fostering inclusion, compassion, and respect, John Carroll University commits to a welcoming climate in which all can live more fully a faith that does justice through genuine encounter, solidarity, and care for the whole person. And with that, it kind of helps, I like to think of, we use the phrase diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI a lot, but sometimes we don't really think about how that really translates. I like to think about how it really translates to the work that I'm committed to doing, and that the whole university is committed to doing. And so for the diversity aspect, and these are other lines that are also a part of our official John Carroll statement. For diversity, we're looking at pursuing inclusive excellence, which means doing the best that we can to make sure we have an inclusive environment by embracing differences, which has to really do with, targeting what we're trying to do to make sure that we are increasing our demographics in several different dimensions, in our student population, our staff population, and our faculty, so that we can take full advantage of the diversity of talents and skills and backgrounds that we were trying to bring to campus. Our equity lens has to do with making sure that we are doing all to enable that no one has anything blocking their ability to realize their full potential. Or to put it a different way, in a less negative framing, we want to make sure that everyone can fully attain what John Carroll has to offer without any particular barriers, or if there are barriers, that we are working intentionally to make sure that we're decreasing any barriers, so that everyone has the chance to truly enrich their lives and their experiences here at John Carroll. And then inclusion is a big part, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. We want everyone to feel that they belong, and we expect all members of our community to demonstrate a genuine willingness to move from not just being aware and tolerant of difference, but truly empathizing, accepting, and working to advance differences. And so that's what, sometimes the statement is made that diversity is being invited to the dance, and inclusion is actually being asked to dance, or that particular analogy that you're really sort of feeling a part of the community and integral to what's going on. So this, in the light of thinking about it as inspired belonging as an offshoot of inspired futures, gets us to see that we're trying to be an institution where everyone can thrive and feel at home. And yet, though we do know through data that we've collected, different surveys that we've done over time, and even as a part of my division, I'm in charge of making sure that we keep aware of any bias incidents that are going on campus so that we can address those quickly and get to, improving our systems, our processes, or anything else that's going on that may be an inhibiting factor or feel exclusionary here on campus. And we take that very seriously, but we do know things do happen. And sometimes some different, as we bring differences on campus, whether it be our breadth of religious identities, our breadth of ethnicities, class, first generation students, as well as LGBTQ, we recognize that sometimes we are still learning how to integrate all of these differences into our overall community. So, but we know that every member of John Carroll's community has a unique story, and we're committed to recognizing and celebrating all of those differences. So we operate under a strategic plan for inclusive excellence that includes several different goals. Several different objectives that can be housed under 4 central goals, which has to do with making sure that we are constantly revisiting our policies and practice and doing things at the leadership level that we see translated throughout different processes and policies all throughout campus. 2, making sure that we're doing things in our curriculum and different areas and arenas of education. So that has to do with what we're doing in our curriculum, as well as what we're doing in co-curricular activities in terms of wider campus activities and opportunities to learn and grow more and understand how to value differences. And this goes a lot in line with what we've always had in place here at John Carroll, particularly when we think about our strong focus on social justice and peace, justice, and human rights. But we're trying to make sure that we expand directly into understanding and increasing an understanding for marginalized identities, different concerns that keep different groups feeling more excluded on campus. Our third main area is recruitment and retention and how we focus on different efforts to make sure that we are doing all that we can to diversify and engage and retain those that we bring onto campus. And then overall, what we're doing to ensure that we have a safe environment, a safe campus climate, and safe meaning psychologically safe, not just physically safe, but psychologically safe to be your authentic self and to show up in spaces where you can do your best. So why does belonging matter, or why do I talk about inspired belonging? Well, inclusion and belonging go hand in hand. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that students in general across the board, if they have a sense of belonging, they feel as though campus is like a second home, then it's critical to their success and their persistence. And it's especially important if you are in a position where you feel less than, that you may feel that you're already coming to campus with certain barriers. You may be a first generation student and you need to be able to assess things and learn things about the campus, or you may be one of very few of any particular identity group. Well, it becomes that much more important because belonging affects your persistence. It leads to things like higher grades, retention and engagement, all of the things that we'd like to do. We don't want to spend a lot of time and effort trying to be very intentional about increasing our diversity on campus. And we also want to spend just as much time making sure that all of our students in particular are able to be successful and stay on campus, graduate in 4 to 5 years and then fully engaged. So a better sense of belonging tends to lead to higher rates of personal and academic success, particularly later in the college years. We know that particularly what happens in the first year can be really instrumental to retention. And so we direct a lot of our efforts to making sure that from day one, we're doing different initiatives, and we're talking about expanding into other initiatives that will help us, again, have that early imprint on personal and academic success, particularly for those from marginalized groups. So higher retention rates, and then also what's becoming increasingly important is understanding the impact that mental health issues can have on anxiety levels and other kinds of levels that can increase or can affect a student's success and persistence. And so belonging is integral to all of that, and it impacts how students are able to integrate, perform, and persist. So we have a goal, particularly for student diversity, to get to 20% by 2026. We're trying to increase our diversity, which means we'll have an increased need for ensuring that our belonging efforts are in line with that. And that's a goal. We've been running gradually more at the 14% range in current students. If we talk about students of color versus white students, if we talk about other category differences like students with disabilities, we're somewhere in the 14 to 15% range, and higher up to 17, I'm sorry, we're in the 17% range, and then somewhere in the 15% range is where we are with first generation students. However, there's a little bit of light at the tunnel because our incoming first year students are actually reflecting sort of 20% of them are students of color in our first year. So our goal would be to sustain that in each of the next 4 years. And even 23% of incoming first year students are first generation. And we are looking at efforts that sustain or even improve that over time. But at a minimum, we're looking at having close to 480 to 560 students on campus that would represent different identity groups. And this isn't capturing all of the identity groups that are there. This isn't statistics that we have on those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which tends to overlap with these categories, but isn't always the same. And it doesn't also capture our religious diversity and LGBTQ, excuse me. But we do have, and we have seen a tremendous amount of growth of students with disabilities. Our Student Accessibility Services Office already has tripled the amount of students that came in with the first year class. And the pandemic has had a lot to do with that. A lot of things that have happened that have added to particularly mental health issues or even physical health issues has increased and has an impact on students that need different accommodations and services. And that's also part of what we address in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it's typically already been growing at least 20%, 10% annually. So we're talking about over 550 students. We're getting to the point that we have almost as many students requiring accommodations as we have student athletes on campus. So how we inspire belonging, just as a quick overview, and you can always find us if you just look at diversity at JCU or look up diversity and JCU. But we have campus-wide DEI initiatives that we do for all of campus, sometimes specifically centered for faculty or faculty and staff, and others for students. We have our Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion. CSDI is what that goes by. Student Accessibility Services, which goes by SAS, and the Title IX office is also a part of DEI, which deals with gender equity issues and making sure that we have a harassment-free campus and dealing with anything that may impede that, and making sure that we, again, keep a campus that is safe and good for belonging. This is a general overview of the kind of initiatives that we have in place now or that we're growing. We've been doing a lot more training and education. We have a reinforcing inclusion through skill building and education, which is our RISE series of workshops, programs. We have a biweekly newsletter that goes out that does some of that reinforcing of awareness and education. But we've done tailored training for different departments, and we've had required online training for students, staff, and faculty. We've really, in the past few years, raised the bar for what we expect for all students, staff, and faculty to understand about training, to understand about bias, awareness, multicultural differences, and making sure that we are being as inclusive as possible. These trainings, however, particularly to be presented and to grow along with us, requires a certain amount of resource investment as well. We've been doing a lot more with community building. We have affinity groups that speak to different communities. We have learning communities that want to focus on DEI-focused topics. We've looked at our policies and practices and revamped our anti-discrimination policy, as well as what we're doing for any grievances and making sure that we're advancing more social justice. There's some ideas already in place to talk about how we might advance curriculum offerings to have a highlighted focus, maybe even certificates that are focused on DEI awareness, because outside of JCU, DEI has become a skill that employers are recognizing and valuing in their employers. So we want to create in students that are actually skilled in being able to talk about things that when they go into their work environments, they could be a leader in that capacity as well. And this goes along really closely with who we are as a university is already. what we stand for in terms of social justice concerns, and a faith that does justice. We've had a lot of community book reads and discussions. These have been really powerful, where we've been able to engage everything from incoming students and during the pandemic to current students, previous students, also known as our alumni, and current staff and faculty, which including senior leadership, where we monthly engage in the reading and discussion of different topics related to understanding differences, historical disparities, as well as perspectives from different points of view. So those allow for conversation is really, really important, particularly for everyone to have an individual attachment to why inclusion matters. We're trying to develop empathy. And again, this is very much in line with how we are and how we approach sort of formation as a Jesuit institution. So our book reads have been really, really successful in that regard. We also see ourselves as supplying information out there. We have racial equity resource guide, I've said the newsletter, and doing a lot more dialogue and reflections. In fact, I worked very closely with our vice president for mission and identity to help to create what the JCU, the Jesuit colleges and universities, are using as an anti-racist examen. And we've been able to integrate what we are and who we are as an institution with the DEI work that we do. So that's a general overview of the kind of initiatives that the overall office is doing, but resources are continually needed to be able to expand these offerings over time. Because again, we're still trying to meet our main objectives of increasing belonging, increasing retention and the engagement, particularly of those that are underrepresented, and ultimately fulfilling our mission, which a large part of it is walking with the excluded. And the excluded are often present on campus, not just outside of campus, and truly exhibiting and acting in a faith, with a faith that does justice. I want to talk specifically about student-focused areas that are exciting, where we are seeing a lot of new initiatives, but of course, where we're going to need more attention and growth. If you're not familiar with our Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion at JCU, this is specific spaces that we have on campus, as well as specific programming that's aimed at sort of either raising awareness about issues that are impacting those that are historically underrepresented, as well as targeting programs, social and development program, giving resources and connections, et cetera, outreach activities to those that we are bringing onto campus that may have non-traditional experiences. And what becomes really important is that we are doing two things at the same time. We're raising the awareness of our larger community, but also making sure that we are there to serve the needs of those that are underrepresented here on campus. A lot of times when you are coming to campus and you are not familiar with the setting, or you don't see a lot of those of yourself reflected, then that isn't inhibited. So we may have resources on campus like great career services or wonderful academic success coaches and things like that. But there are students that come, and if you're already feeling marginalized for whatever particular reason, you may not seek those resources out. So we make sure that we connect students directly to those resources, and sometimes bring it to our office and lounges so that they're in a safe space to be able to know that these are welcome spaces on campus to take full advantage of. So with that, we have a lot of different programs. Our peer mentoring program, as well as our Wayfinders program, I want to highlight those in particular in a second, but we do celebration programs, a multicultural welcome, as well as a recognition program at the end of when students are graduating. So we're now talking about it as the CSDI journey, where we're walking with students all through their time here at John Carroll, not just understanding their differences, but trying to help to promote them into leadership positions, making sure that they're academically successful, and making sure that they're professionally successful as well. So we do a lot in terms of advocacy. We've started some First at JCU, which is for first generation students. We have a social justice movie series, as well as cultural awareness speakers. But what I was talking about is bringing a lot of services to the students. Is what we like to do, is meet the students where they are and where they gather and feel comfortable. So you'll see a lot of virtual community or career chats, and Let's Talk is bringing our counseling center services even directly to students on campus. So And we're constantly working even more closely with academic environments as they are starting to, different academic departments are starting to invest in ways that they can recruit students specifically into academic majors, but highlight how they can be much more intentional in how they get students from a diversity of backgrounds. So MELT, just to give you an overview, MELT is our Match, Empower, Learn, Teach program. It's our peer mentoring program where right now we have John Carroll 3rd and 4th year students that are trained and paid to mentor 1st year students and helping to aid their indoctrination and their orientation to campus, particularly in the first year. This program has been tremendously successful in helping us to retain students. That 1st year, as I quoted, that's so essential. We see sort of that giving this kind of attention leads to a tremendous increase in academic achievement, not just in the 1st year, but in retention over time. What we'd like to see is sort of continued opportunities for mentoring outside of the 1st year, but the 1st year has been most crucial and has had the most impact. And these are just some quotes of how that sort of former mentees and mentors that we've had active through the years that have been involved and been able to extend into leadership roles. Pretty much all of our mentees become mentors. And so it's a nice give back, a nice connection between the years of the class years and our students. I had a couple of other examples. We've had Maya Williams, for instance, who worked with the MELT program first as a mentee and then has gone on to be a mentor and then an intern in our CSDI department. She's done a lot of work with us, but likes to work with students that come behind her, and she's taken on a lot of leadership roles as a result. That we're really proud that we create this is a part of the journey that I was speaking to. We don't just sort of connect with students the 1st year, we're doing a lot to connect with them, and not just in CSDI, but make sure that they're fully integrated into the John Carroll environment. This is another example of Harim, who worked as a mentee and really talks about how he was shown the ropes to how to maximize his time here at John Carroll, and he was able to turn around and become a mentor that likes to give back. Again, another way in which we do the service learning kind of perspective. We don't think about it this way, but how we invest in students that have needs immediately here on campus and how we encourage other students to give back to students that come behind them is an essential part of developing the kind of leaders and the kind of graduates that we like to see coming out of John Carroll. We had another MK or Michaela who worked with us through our MELT program, went on to be quite an active student leader and is now a case manager in the behavioral health field. And again, just some quotes that just sort of show I wanted to be around students that knew some of the struggles I had going forth, and she was able to give back and make sure that students behind her were going through those same struggles. But again, I just wanted to kind of give you some names and faces to show that we have a lot of successes that are not just one-offs. We have students that we invest in and engage in quite deeply over the 4 years that they're here. We even have a few legacy stories that we're proud of. The Flores family has sent 3 of their daughters through our institution, each one being successful in working with CSDI and doing mentee and mentoring, but going on to strong leadership roles. This is a picture of the most recent grad and the other alums, the older sisters. And we have 1 student that's a senior here now. We've also had 2 other families of brothers and sisters who have been successful here, growing in their leadership roles and moving on to even become a graduate student, when we have in the case of Jonathan Peleg, who is now a graduate student here at JCU. So the time that we invest in students in providing these kinds of connections and development opportunities really pays off in terms of what we're able to do. Our most recent exciting program that we have is our Wayfinders program, which is an opportunity to give micro internship opportunities to students, particularly focused on those that historically would not have the same advantages. What we don't understand is we know the value of internships. We always talk about internships for what we want to do to invest in our students before we push them out into being successful professionals in the world, where internships usually prime students for their post-college lives. But internships come with a lot of taken for granted assumptions. Internships often assume that you can travel to wherever internships are located, or that you don't also have to carry additional jobs when it comes to social economic issues. And sometimes it's a lot of times dependent on internal networks that first generation students or students of color may not have access to. So we found in our own research that a lot of students were not able to take advantage of internship possibilities, and we're missing out on some of the professional development needs that we truly want all of our students to have. And this is an example of where we see inequities and where we look for ways to have more belonging going on. So the Wayfinders program, which is now funded externally by the Finn Foundation, but it was a 2-year program that started last year to help us pay for micro internship opportunities to narrow the gap for underrepresented students getting the kind of professional development that they need. And so we have a Wayfinders program now with over 90 organizations, a lot of them nonprofit and locally, that are coming up with projects for our students to do. And micro internships are 20-hour projects where they work with community partners on specific tasks, get short-term experience, and then we also give them workshops and other kinds of developmental training. In our first year, we were able, despite COVID and despite being virtual half of the year, we had 20 students that did at least one micro internship opportunity, and over half of those students were offered either an additional long-term internship or employment. And that's pretty phenomenal considering that we offer micro internships to you from the first year. So this is something that first year students can take advantage of and be involved in with each year that they're here on campus, which is resume building as well as career readiness building. At the same time, it helps for those outside of John Carroll to get a taste of how great our students are, and particularly to see a greater diversity of our students and increase our visibility and understand how we are investing in a greater diversity of our students at the same time. So this has become a pretty powerful program that I really wanted to highlight because for the students, as you see, they get a lot of experience that they're able to take on right away. But for those outside of the community, they have great quotes about opening up the eyes to the diverse talent that is available and coming out of John Carroll. They've been overwhelmingly impressed by the quality of our students, which should come to no surprise to any of us. But again, opening up the eyes to the diversity that does exist, and the fact that we're trying to invest in growing that is we want to continue a strong program like this. We had Karen Chu who worked on a 20-hour project helping to support the Asian and Pacific Islander community for opening up and just mental health support and information about sort of accessing either vaccinations and other information, doing some translations and doing some live Zoom meetings, but a lot was accomplished with just 20 hours while they also are getting paid. We've worked with the Entrepreneurship Education Consortium. Again, we had another student that had an amazing experience. And was able to increase their networking skills, at the same time learn more about entrepreneurship. And that's another great plus, is they're getting hands-on experience and sometimes changing their majors as a result of it, which there's nothing wrong with, because we want students to be able to translate and feel that they have an even better understanding of what they're going to do when they finish post-graduation. Lastly, also, we had 2 students most recently do a really impressive, where they conducted 93 interviews in their 40 hours, the combined time between the 2 of them, to talk about what is great about Medina County. And they were able to make that presentation, though virtually, to 36 different leaders in Medina County to help the county to reach its particular goals for civic engagement and civic involvement, but also to, again, work on their presentation skills, their research skills, all of these things that are really important: data sorting, marketing, public speaking, and they were really, really well received. And lastly, I just wanted to point out Esther, who is a current student of ours and works really strongly, a leader in our Black students organization, as well as a mentor, and Meldon, working in different capacities of the student governing body. Because of her micro internship, she learned through her experiences that she really was much more drawn to media and communication. So she's changed her major and will extend her time here, but that's a win for us because we have a student that's, because of their specific John Carroll experience, was able to really, really sort of soar beyond what they might have been thinking they were going to do or get involved in. I like to just showcase the testimonials and let you to see the faces, because these are students that we are working with constantly, and that's just maybe 6 or 7 of them. So we've started to do more academic-based programming. We've sought out sort of grant funding opportunities to start programs that we'll need to keep and sustain over time. We have a Mirrors program, which is focused on STEM, getting more diversity into our STEM programs and offering renewable scholarships to low-income, specifically transfer students that come from underrepresented backgrounds. They do research, they attend scientific meetings, but again, grant funding helps us to start the programs, but we need to be able to sustain these kind of efforts over time. Teach Like Me is another program that's in development. We've gotten some seed money to fully develop the idea, but the focus is on trying to build a pipeline for people of color, students that come from the students of color from the Cleveland Metro Municipal School District, from Cleveland, and those that are interested in becoming teachers. And so it's an interesting kind of a program where we're trying to recruit them into John Carroll. While they're at John Carroll, they will work with other students within CMSD schools, so learn how to help students to tutor and to grow. Sort of, we're trying to help them to train high school students in doing things that would be teacher education related, bring them into John Carroll in terms of teacher education, and then help them sort of have all of that additional experience as they move on. A couple of other proposed initiatives that are important. I spoke a little bit about how valuable MELT has been. Well, what we've known in the past is that it's equally valuable to have some bridge opportunities where we can bring students to campus, particularly those that are underrepresented, bring them to campus and help them to get a head start, help them to learn the campus, perhaps get some extra focus on making sure they know where all the offices are, the resources, some academic skills, some things focused on building self-confidence. All of that is important to not just having the peer mentor relationship, but also being able to succeed over time. We had a Pathways program several years ago, again, with different funding initiatives. We ended up having to move and just focus on the MELT programming. But again, we want to have a more holistic approach to making sure that we are connecting with students when they're coming out of high school, making sure that they're ready to come here and ready to go and succeed. And they feed back, going back and bringing in other students when they have a successful experience like that. So that's reinvigorating our Pathways program. So we don't have that now, but we would like to reinvigorate that. And then we have a lot of that's going on in our student accessibility services, where we're trying to expand the kinds of technology and resources we have. And we're even looking at focused programs that would be centered on expanding our support services and wraparound services, particularly for those with specific needs. Those on the spectrum, we're seeing a number of students growing that at the college level, but there's a wraparound supports that are needed there. So there's an expansion of what we really need to do. Those that are coming into college now, there's just, it's like I said, it's been growing, was growing 10% annually. I don't even know, we haven't gotten to the end of this year for me to say how much it grew in this year alone, but we're already seeing 3 times as many students up to, I believe, this time of the year, we usually would have seen 20 new students, and we're seeing more like 70, 75. So, it'll peter off, but we see, again, a big jump this year. So I just wanted to conclude with just emphasizing that we know that a diverse community is what gives strength to our entire institution. And so inspired belonging is a natural outcome of everything that we're doing here in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. And we stated our commitment. We have a diversity statement. We have active leaders in place, but we have to demonstrate it. And we live out our mission and values through the work that we do. And it's these kinds of initiatives that I've highlighted, as well as any newer ideas that we are having, as we are aware of needs that change and we bring more difference into our community. So we do have specific investment opportunities for increasing and helping to support what we're trying to do here on campus. We need certain investments to help sustain and develop current initiatives, as I just discussed, specific ones that can range at around $10,000 to the establishment of endowments and scholarship fundings that would help for this to be not just shorter term investments, but how we can make sure that our commitment to growing in diversity and belonging is sustainable over time. And those would be sort of larger high-end donations in terms of endowments and endowments for scholarships, for positions, and for research funds. We have several goals I didn't focus on as much in this presentation, but what we need to do to really grow our diversity at the staff and particularly faculty level is we need to have resources here that are attractive to faculty from a greater diversity of backgrounds. And that may mean having specialized research support funds that would be attractive to new candidates, or investing in postdoctoral fellowships that allow for those that are recent grads to come here, get to know the John Carroll experience, and then move into being full-time faculty. So that's what I have for my presentation. I like to end with this shot because it just shows how our diversity, particularly in numbers, has been increasing over the last, I'm losing count now, 8 years. 2013 in the corner, in the left high corner is how many students we had working with us on our journey. And the class of 2021, we have to do it this way because our last, that's who's reflected now. We haven't had our cultural celebration. The class of 2020 had their graduation a little bit virtually. So, but this just reflects sort of what we're seeing and how we're growing and the commitment that we have. And I'm inspired by it, and I'm hoping that I can inspire others to be equally excited about what we're trying to do here for making a better John Carroll overall. So I didn't know if there's any questions. We have a small group, so you can just unmute and shout out, or don't shout. Anything I can clarify or give any further information on?
So Tiffany, thank you. So I have a question. So my question was going to be, how many students are we engaging in a given year, and is there growth? And this slide shows tremendous growth. And kudos to you for all of the creative programming and the regular updates that you're doing to our community on this. So that was going to be my question, is how much growth is there? And do you see that changing at all, which this is huge, so.
And it's also good to be mindful that a lot of the students we grow, we have those that we can identify coming in that come from traditional identity groups that are tracked. So we know students of color, or we may know, just like we know our gender makeup, we may even know those that are high need or first generation. We identify that coming in. But some of the other groups, students change their religious affiliations over time. We have issues with other identities in terms of LGBTQ, you know, these things, those are connections that are made as they are here on campus and feel more comfortable. So it can range who we see in the first year versus moving on. But what's important is we tend to grow more students over years. So we know who's coming in the class. There were about, under 100 students in our first year class. They will take a while to find our resources and really sort of value. But then if you, again, imagine, we have close to most of the majority of that percentage that I've told you that are participating in some way and along through the years. And we change and modify our programming depending on student needs. So the Wayfinders program, for instance, has grown, and we're able to actually feed back over to what Career Services has identified as some needs that they were seeing but weren't quite sure or necessarily feeling, how to make an entrance into addressing sort of some of the gaps that they were feeling. So we're doing a lot of those workshops in unison and together. So we're growing as an overall institution. And I truly believe that something like Wayfinders, I neglected to mention, we're the only institution that's doing a program like that. We're unique. We've, in terms of micro internships, specifically focused on underrepresented populations, but an entire program that's micro internships, workshops, et cetera, we're the first of its kind. So that means it's a possible signature program that could become something quite powerful for connecting our current students to being sort of really active alumni in the future, and also helping to connect us to the other interesting fact is that we've had so many nonprofits involved that it really does align with how our students are engaging in work that is still socially focused, that is still social justice oriented, but in a different way than, I know some of you may be talking about CSSA, but in a different way from service learning and social action and service in that way. But they're committing to wanting to do it professionally. Any other questions?
So if there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Tiffany, for giving us an overview of all of the good work happening under your leadership and all of the students that we are serving. We invite feedback after this session is over. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and we look forward to taking more of this on the road. Both with our alumni community, our donor community, and also with prospective students and their families. So if any of you have questions or suggestions for us as we move this forward, we would love to hear them.